So today, Tim, I'd like to talk a bit about a couple of things, actually, a couple of important things to people in business. These days, every company has to see themselves as somewhat of a media company. And you, having worked in broadcast radio for a number of years, you have some knowledge and probably some wonderful advice and pointers that you can give a person about maximizing any opportunity that they might have to be on the radio. Let's say it's a business owner, somebody guiding a nonprofit, etc. Those moments when you can spend time talking to a larger, broader audience on the radio can be very useful and valuable moments. So if somebody is coming to be on the radio and you see yourself as, for this moment, their advisor on how to behave, how to maximize the moment and the opportunity, what are the first things you'd be saying to them?
I think in today's environment, really it's about making the connection with the audience. I think especially because there's the iPad, there's so many different ways of connecting to music or connecting to talk, and there's so many different avenues out there. You have to have that one way that you can connect with your audience that will mean something. I think it's so valuable to have that interactive capability as well. Make them feel like they're a part of the team. But somebody that's getting started, I would say the basics for that. It's so hard to get in this industry right now because it's shrinking. That's the biggest thing. I think the one thing that people would need to get in even nowadays is to have out of the box thinking. I think it's how are you going to connect with your audience? As far as Twitter, how are you going to connect with your audience? It's not so much about the voice. It used to be about the voice and it used to be about the face. Not so much anymore. It's about what you can bring that's unique and sellable to the market.
Well, let's take it and put it in the position of a business owner. Not a person at this point. We'll talk about not about a person attempting to get into radio as their profession, but a person who has an opportunity to appear, let's say, as a guest on a show because they've written a book, or their business is something that's getting some buzz in the news. Now they've been booked onto a radio program where usually it could be 3 to 5 minutes of them talking about themselves, their history, and their business. So to maximize that precious 5 minutes of time, should they have in mind as the host of the radio program begins to question them? How can they maximize this time and moment?
I think the biggest selling point is to make sure that you get whatever you're pitching in that time frame. The host the host is very good about that. The host is very good about making sure that they do a mention. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're focused. Sometimes, especially in talk radio, if you're on a specific subject, that's a breaking news story or something like that, and you have some expertise in that, but you've written a book per se. That's why you're an expert at it. Sometimes, the host may get lost on that, so you want to make sure that you mention that somewhere in there. So if they ask you a question, if you've written a book about China just built an aircraft carrier, I think I saw that today, and maybe you've written a book about the rise of China. They ask you that question. So has this been a process forever? Your next response would be, well, as I say in my book, and then give you the name of the book. It's always mentioned. It's always valuable to mention that, knowing that you have only 5 minutes, and even if they say 5 minutes, it might be 2 minutes. Just make sure that you get that in that limited amount of time.
So that's good advice. Now, beyond being specific about mentioning your product, the reason that you're there, how does a guest on a radio show begin to make it memorable? In other words, have they got their own sort of log lines in mind? Have they got, is it worth their while to develop some distinguishing phraseology, some distinguishing phrases, perhaps from the book or about life in general or something, so that a person listening goes away saying, I never thought of it that way?
Sure. It always helps to have a publicist because they're really good at crafting words. And as you probably know, I mean, if you listen to an interview with one person that's talking about one subject on one station, no matter what the questions are, they're always going to have kind of the same answers. It's almost like a not Congress, but they tend not to answer your questions. They always have kind of to the script answers. A good publicist will set someone up with that. So I think the answer it really is, speak with the publicist first. Speak with someone who's done this and done this quite well. You can come up with some great answers, but they can really make it sellable, I think.
Now, if a person has been on the radio now, they've done this wonderful interview following your advice of relentlessly mentioning the product that they're there to promote, giving some personality so that they're not just author number 3 or 5. They have some personality to go with that. When you think of authors, famous authors, it could be, let's say, Tom Wolfe. If I'm watching a television program and the sound is down and I see an author in a white suit, that's probably Tom Wolfe. Now, if they've done all of that but have to adapt themselves to the modern platforms, media platforms, what advice can you give them about what they do with Facebook, Twitter, and the associated sort of social media accompaniments now that go along with a good radio interview?
Sure. The social media platform is so important these days. It's the number one thing. Working in radio, that's the number one thing that we mention. We sometimes don't mention the book. If they're pushing a book or they're mentioning. We always want to mention that Twitter feed, because even if you have this book out right now, you want them to follow you, because then you're going to release a book, and you're going to, you want them to follow what you're doing, because you may not be on that show again. So, I mean, that's a great point. Social media is so important today. So when you're a guest on a show and you have that 4 minutes, make sure that you tell the person that's booking it, hey, I want you to mention my Twitter account, and keep that Twitter account, and don't change the Twitter account. Make sure it's one that you're going to keep for a while. And then, obviously you want to get your product mentioned, but that's the best way to have people kind of follow along. How do you get people to follow along when you have that 4 minute time span? It's really by chance. It depends on who you're being interviewed by. It's just, sorry about the plane. We obviously live in Los Angeles. They're working on the helicopter. But sometimes it just really depends on the interviewer. And it's always by chance who's listening on your show. There's a lot of people don't listen to the radio anymore. So what we do often is we will post an interview, a couple of interviews on our website that are memorable. So I guess if you have a way going into knowing what the topic is and coming up with just maybe 1 or 2 memorable phrases, like you said, that will get your interview up on their website. Then that expands even more. It's always about expanding on the web, expanding on, getting the interview re-aired, whatever. It's so to your point, I guess, make sure that they have the social media first of all, but also because you may not be, you may be in a span where there's not a lot of listeners, make sure that you say something important so they'll re-air that interview or put it up on their website too. So,
Tim,
I don't think I answered your question quite well.
You did a pretty good job. Another question regarding that space, that physical space now, where there's a host in a radio studio. The guest is more likely on the telephone, but sometimes the guest may be in studio so that the host and the guest are face to face. Is it common practice at radio stations now to have a webcam, in effect, focused on the two faces, or maybe two faces in one picture, so that the guest who is there promoting his or her product or book can count on a video feed going to the radio station's website so that it is live not just on radio but also on the web?
What I'll respond with is they tested that early on in about 2005 when that technology first came out. They tested the web stream. It really didn't take off for some reason. People connect with radio without the visual aspect of it. We even tape the interviews. We don't even have them live anymore. We tape the interviews, and there's just a sense, I guess, that radio is supposed to be kind of a mysterious entity, and when you reveal what's behind the curtain, I guess it kind of takes that magic away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people consciously don't want to like have that curtain taken away, because it's amazing. You can have the ratings come back, and somebody will be like all about listening to the thing. You can have the web numbers come back on a stream, audio stream, and people are blown away by it. When you record the video though, or when you show it live, it's outrageous how little people are watching. So I think it's a technology that's still in the works, and they're still trying to figure out how to connect to the audience that way. For now, though, for anybody who's aspiring to be in radio and has that idea and has an idea about how to make people watch it, I think you open up a vehicle that we're still struggling with. So
now let's talk just a minute as we finish up here today, Tim. And thank you again for joining us. Your profession as a professional producer of radio programming, or content as it might best be called today. Talk to us a bit about what the producer of a radio program has to do or does or works at to maximize the viability, the audience ratings for their program.
Nelson, I'm sorry, I was breaking up a little bit there.
No, I was saying that I want to take advantage of this time and having you with us today on the Hangout. Because you are a professional radio producer, talk to us a bit about what you do as a successful radio producer. What are the benchmarks for you? What benchmarks are you attempting to hit to create successful radio content?
Yeah, I think because the industry has changed so much, and it really happened with the collapse of the economy. What really happened was advertising. I mean, every industry is affected, but especially in ours, and we were hit very hard. People stopped advertising. Companies didn't have any more money. They weren't advertising. That's how we make our money. So it's incredible how much everything kind of downsized. To answer your question, in today's industry, what our challenge is, and what I try to bring to the table is kind of that out-of-the-box thinking that I was talking about earlier when we were talking about how to get in the industry. It's not about what has been successful in the past. It's about what you can envision being the next way. And I mean, that may be a generic answer to a lot of industries. And that may be the case. I think for me, what I try to do every day is walk in and, we talk about the Facebook. I have a host that's been on the air for several years. He's a very well-spoken, as I'm not, but well-spoken host who doesn't really connect with the social media, and I'm trying to get him involved in that, and I'm trying to get him to not talk about stuff that's in the past, talk about stuff that's coming up, and it's all about kind of looking forward, I guess, and really having the vision to see what that next step is, and see what your audience wants. I can't stress enough, it's all about interacting with your audience. And by interacting, I don't just mean bringing them in, I mean knowing what they want, knowing what they expect. And I think what makes a good producer, and what makes anybody that's behind the scenes, bringing that product along, is knowing what that audience wants, and not just from the generic test results and everything, going out and getting that information. So it's really about connecting with the audience.
Connecting with the audience. Tim, that's a word and a phrase that we will carry from this conversation, because whether a person is in business selling a product, offering a service, or offering that service through media, be it radio, television, or as we're doing today here in the Hangout online, it is always about connecting with a person at the other end, the person I call the customer or the end user. Tim, it was a delight speaking with you today. Thank you for offering us some insights and also some useful and practical advice for people who may one day, for some reason, find themselves on the radio.